And so for the Revive Plus, a sequel to some of the earlier grants, here are some of the quick facts and circumstances. This opens at noon on November 30th. So even though this grant got announced yesterday, it is now going to go live for applications on Monday at noon, and then it will go until December 4th on Friday. So you've got a few days there to get the grant application in. It is first come, first served basis. So I recommend applying for it as soon as you can. In the past, in the earlier ones, their money didn't run out, but this is really the end of the year. They're hoping to, Alabama seems like they're hoping to kind of utilize the rest of the funds. So I think they're going to be encouraging more people. The grant size is bigger. So I do recommend applying for this as soon as you can on Monday. If you have some Thanksgiving plans, maybe try to get this out of the way on Monday, and then you don't have to worry about it later on. But you do want to check the email. Just got a good question there. Oh, I'm sorry, that is wrong. November 23rd. Scratch the slide. I had it written down right elsewhere. November 23rd through December 4th. That's when the application is through. So make sure Monday, this coming Monday for Thanksgiving, you've got application ready and ready to roll. But these are first come, first served. These are for businesses, nonprofits, and faith-based organizations. So really any type of entity, if you're a sole proprietorship, single member LLC, corporation, S corporation, partnership, any nonprofit, or even if you don't sort of have that nonprofit framework, but you're still a faith-based organization, and that is defined in some of the questions for that Revive Plus, you can still apply for this. For this entity, you have to have 50 or fewer. For some reason, and I think they had earlier they had a medical practitioner support. It is not applicable for hospitals or nursing homes. And you had to have been in operation from March 1st and must still be in operation as of the date of application. And of course, this can cover eligible expenses. What that means, a lot of the definitions are similar to the original PPP. The expenses are qualified there, but there is a little bit of clarity there for certain PPE, the personal protective equipment like masks, gloves, depending on your office or business. Some businesses had to have more of that in place than others, especially I think I saw on the latest Safer at Home order, it had an ability for restaurants to have more people in the restaurant, but they had to have partitions up if they wanted to do it that way. So I would bet that would qualify as well. So these are all kinds of different expenses that businesses may face, kind of as they're going through the process of having kind of things return to a normal or new normal anyway. Sometimes the easiest way to kind of look at this is to compare and contrast it to the earlier programs. So kind of a real quick breakdown. Here is how the Alabama Revive Plus, which is on the far right, differs from some of the others. So, at the beginning of this, the federal government released the EIDL, which was just a loan and you had to repay, along with the PPP, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with here. You basically got a loan that could be forgivable. The expenses are non-deductible. So, basically it's just an infusion of funds that you're able to use to kind of keep paying your employees, paying your rent, kind of keep the lights on and keep things going. Those two happened earlier on. Then in the middle of the year, we had Alabama Revive, which was a grant program that was for up to $15,000, but you had to have less than 20 employees and under 3 million in revenue. And that was through My Alabama Taxes. And of course, that one is taxable, the income from that. If anyone did that, then you're probably familiar with that process and the requirements there. And then later on, there was also the Alabama grant for nonprofit organizations and faith-based organizations. Another $15,000 that was a grant. There weren't as many restrictions on kind of the type of business and entity it was as far as contribution revenue limits, if you had employees and everything, and taxability isn't really too much of an issue there. That one was administered by Alabama Department of Finance, and you had to do it through the submittable, I think it's submittable.com website. So if you worked with any charities, and yeah, we'll be able to share the presentation as well. We'll send it out afterwards. and I'll update for the date, but just remember Monday. If you had worked with any charities or organizations, or maybe you're on the board for someone that pursued this, this is probably what it's going to be most similar to. So if you did Revive earlier in the year, that since that was through My Alabama Taxes, that won't really be what's happening here. They even directed people that didn't have a MAT account, a My Alabama Taxes account, to create one. If you made one, then good, but what you need now is a submittable account. There's a little uncertainty here. I think you can go ahead and create it and then have the account ready to go so that you can just log in on Monday morning. But we've kind of gotten some different feedback from the state. So I recommend going ahead and creating a submittable account. Worst case, you have to create a brand new one on Monday, but that saves you a little bit of time. So between now and Sunday, go ahead and go to the link, and I'll have the link available later on. And it's also in the Revive Plus grant document information. But if you go ahead and go to that website, you can set up an account and just save yourself having the verified email, put in your name and email and everything, and then you'll be ready to roll when it comes around for Monday morning at noon. But then finally, Alabama Revive Plus is the latest one. The grant size is bigger at $20,000. This one is for 50 or less employees. And to clarify, a little uncertainty may exist here. And if you want to double check, you may want to reach out to the state. In some of the language, it says for businesses with 50 or less employees, and then separately it states nonprofits and faith-based organizations. So does a nonprofit also have to have less than 50 employees? I don't know. Just some uncertainty that you may want to clear up by contacting Montgomery to kind of clarify. Because if you're a nonprofit, but you have more than 50 employees, probably definitely worth it to at least double check before you disregard it and write it off. Presumably, Alabama Department will say that this is taxable like the original Revive grant was. But of course, if you're a nonprofit or faith-based organization, there may be different circumstances there. But this one is, again, through Alabama Department of Finance, and you can do it through submittable. So, go ahead and set up an account, kind of get that taken care of. And then you don't have to kind of mess with that later on Monday when at least a few other people, if not everybody, is trying to do it then. Again, the biggest thing is just being aware of this, telling your neighbors, this is money that your community can really benefit from. And you want to be able to have that, the funds, or even if you're not eligible for your business, the company next door, your barber, whatever, make sure that they get their funds if they're eligible for it. Again, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. So don't forget to ping any questions there. So there has been some uncertainty, and this is really just in the wording. Some people said for the first Revive, and even for this one, said, hey, I saw in the language it says if you got a PPP, you're not eligible. And really the full part of this is that if you got a PPP and you only have that amount of expenses, you're not eligible. But if you had more expenses, then you still are. And the expense range for this one is March 1st, 2020 through December 30th. I don't know why not December 31st, December 30th of 2020. So even if you got PPP and that was supposed to last you for 2.5 months, maybe you also happen to get Revive, and maybe even got a little EIDL. Assuming you've kind of used all those expenses, in the past few months, and you still have to make it all the way through the end of December, you could still definitely be eligible for the Revive Plus grant. Again, it's about the eligible expenses and what does that mean, and there's uncertainty there. That's where you definitely want to look at maybe some of the definitions or consult your accountant. But as far as that goes, even if you got an EIDL, and this one, Brandbuster Video, got 10 grand. They also got PPP of 6 grand, and then got the Alabama Revive grant of 15,000. That's still only 31,000. If you ended up having 51,000 of expenses that you're projecting between March 1st and December 30th, and you only got support so far of 31,000, you can still apply for this. Even if you only estimate your end of year need is another 10,000 or 1,000, this is still something that you could still possibly apply for and be eligible for. As you go through the application online, a lot of the questions, it sounds like, and this is just from my kind of phone call with someone in Montgomery trying to give me some more information. Some of the questions may be, what are you going to do with the funding? And they're basically looking for, is it going to be an eligible expense as they've been loosely defined? You know, if you're going to go buy a Lamborghini, that's not going to qualify. If you're going to pay employees, pay for utilities, pay for rent, you know, have to buy more face masks, whatever that may be, that's where this can kind of be a benefit. Yeah, and okay, yeah. Eligible expenses. This list is the top list is just for the earlier definition of the PPP. In general, that was payroll, rent, and utilities. And then in the recent Revive Alabama from earlier in the year, they included PPE, which is your face mask, or even if you're maybe a store and you have to get those plastic barriers, or if you're a restaurant and you have to get more cleaning supplies, it's not going to be a big ticket item, but you know, it's still something that has an expense and that they're trying to cover here. So those are the general categories. Again, I recommend looking at the both the grant documents themselves, and sometimes it refers to some of the earlier definitions that the federal government gave. You know, see what that kind of means. There's some room so that you can say, hey, if I had this earlier for PPP, now that the 2.5 months is up, you know, you can justify the same cost. Again, there's no hard answers here, but it's just encouraging you to look into it and not dismiss it just because you already got EIDL or you already got Revive, or even if you already got, let's say, the medical practitioner one that Alabama had, and some people are just getting a week ago. You know, that can be totally separate as long as you have those expenses. Someone did have a question about if deep cleaning of offices are eligible expenses. I mean, I would think so. It's going to be more a question of if Alabama calls you and says, hey, what expenses did you have? And you can say, I had some deep cleaning costs because I have customers coming in and out, because I had an employee that had COVID, just because I'm in a state of pandemic, I wanted to make sure things were clean. You know, it's up to you. That's something you're going to have to define, but I could totally see that falling within that range of, oh yeah, this is something that you wouldn't have done or probably wouldn't have done if it weren't for 2020 having, you know, pandemic measures that you had to take care of and everything. Now it does list out some specific items that you cannot use this Revive Plus grant for. And so anything that's covered by insurance, you know, basically you can't get double dip and say, hey, I had to pay for cleaning, maybe insurance is going to cover whatever. Anything that's a reimbursement for costs or damages covered by insurance isn't going to count. If it's already been covered by PPP or EIDL or some of the pandemic unemployment assistance, you know, and that would be payroll. If it's already been covered by that, then no. So if you had those, again, like the earlier example, if you had some of those PPP and EIDL that covered some of the earlier amounts, you know, you can't double dip. But if you have more expenses through December 30th, then you can still use it here. You can still say, hey, I have more expenses that are going to take place even in the coming, you know, month, and I need to get some assistance from Alabama Department of Finance. That's kind of what this is for. If you're a charity or nonprofit or faith-based organization, and you had some donors give you some items or services, you can't reimburse some of these funds. And that's, again, the same thing that we saw earlier with the nonprofit one. And then the workforce bonuses other than hazard pay or overtime. So you can't just say, hey, you know what? We're going to give you a Revive Plus bonus. That's not going to work. It has to be able to be described as something that's related to hazard pay or overtime. And really with holiday season coming up, a lot of businesses are going to have overtime. You know, if you're retail maybe, or even if you're online retail or your restaurants or whatever, you may have more people that are, you know, needing to work overtime, or if you just need more people so that you can have enough staffing so that there's not a, you know, someone ends up being out sick, you know, you're covered, or someone has to work overtime to cover some extra shifts because someone's not available, you know, that's legit, but just not a, hey, here's a bonus, you know, something that isn't out of the ordinary. Severance pay, you know, you can't make this an opportunity to use this for severance pay and legal settlements. You know, if you get sued, you can't be like, oh, here's my 20 grand, there we go. Here are the submission requirements. And again, if anyone here did the nonprofit one, it should be very similar, but this is the only information they've really given us. We can't get a preview, it seems, at least not today. I mean, you might even check back Sunday, but right now we can't get a preview of the application itself, but it's administered by the Alabama Department of Finance. You separately have to set up an account on Submittable. And then there's an Alabama section that you'll be able to apply on Monday to get the grant starting at noon. It needs your entity legal name, your physical location information, your payment information. And so that means they're going to want your routing and account number. Is it checking, is it savings, what bank is it? And if you look a little further down, they're also probably going to want a scanned voided check or bank memo, something that just confirms that information. Contact information, and they may have follow-up questions. And again, with this being the holidays, even though the period may not close till later, I'm not sure when they'll start looking at these. So if you do have any sort of information that they need to follow up with this, make sure to just be checking that contact information. If it's a work email, if you want to put your personal one, just make sure that you're available in case they have questions or follow-up or need clarity. And then risk assessment, I asked them this specifically. The person seemed to make it seem like it was no big deal. Basically just means that, it almost sounds like they're making sure you're not going to close your doors tomorrow and then, before they hand you a grant. He couldn't give me too much information, but it sounded like it was just a couple of questions, but risk assessment is part of the submission requirements. And then finally, you're going to have to upload some PDFs. You're going to need something that confirms your EIN. You're going to need a signed W-9. And so again, these are things you can go ahead and start gathering ahead of time. I did help somebody that was doing a medical practitioner grant a couple of weeks ago. And, if you're looking at the W-9, a lot of times it wants if it's a single member LLC or sole proprietorship, it wants the individual's name and not the entity name on line 1. But there was some uncertainty or back and forth about which name needed to be there. So again, just be prepared to answer any questions they have and kind of make sure that they're good to go. Really, it sounds like if they want to confirm EIN, W-9 should be sufficient. Really, right now, this is all we have to go on. You might want to make sure you've got a PDF of your tax return or a 1099, but I think they may just want to confirm that EIN on the W-9. Finally, they're going to want a signed certification and assurance form. That's something that you'll be given as you're applying. You'll need to then kind of print it out, fill it out, and ink sign it, or they may even take e-signatures. They didn't clarify that yet, but just when you gather everything else, there'll be something new that you won't be able to get until the time you actually go to apply. So, make sure if you have a scanner there, or if your phone can take pictures and kind of turn them into PDFs, or if you're able to e-sign, just be prepared for that to be an issue that comes up. It doesn't sound like it's something that they will have a built-in e-signature option for on that side of it. So just be prepared in case you need to sign and scan or whatever, that you're able to get that together.